It is July 14th, 1420, and on Vitkov Hill, now part of Czech capital Prague, but then outside the city walls, a battle is about to unfold. Fewer than 30 Hussite fighters have built 2 fortified log cabins, waiting for the approaching Crusader army of Sigismund of Luxembourg. The odds for these 26 men and 3 women, armed mainly with flails and polearms, seem hopeless. Yet the entire operation is led by Jan Žižka, a one-eyed commander who has already proven himself a brilliant strategist. And indeed, the Hussites, aided by around 50 Prague infantry advancing with a fearsome chant, ultimately rout their enemy. 200 Crusaders die on the battlefield, the Hussites secure the right bank of the Vltava River, and Žižka becomes a legend. From this moment on, he is a symbol of hope for the Hussites, and a ruthless commander feared by his enemies as he lays waste to their cities. The infamous Hussite Wars are about to begin. We know little about Jan Žižka's youth. He was likely born around 1360 in Trocnov, nowadays Czech Republic, and lost his left eye at about the age of 10. As an adult, he made a living as a bandit. His gang stole whatever they could: jewelry, armor, clothing, even spices. Around 1409, most of them ended up on the execution block, but Žižka was pardoned by King of Bohemia Wenceslas IV. At nearly 50 years old, Jan Žižka finally took up an honest trade. He became a mercenary, gaining his first real combat experience beyond the borders of the Bohemian kingdom. While Žižka fights abroad, a preacher named Jan Hus emerges in Prague, calling attention to the church's moral decline. He is so popular that the Catholic Church and Roman Emperor Sigismund of Luxembourg have him burned at the stake in Constance, Germany. But his ideas are spreading like wildfire. His followers begin calling themselves Hussites, and tensions escalate rapidly. Preacher Jakubek of Stříbro starts conducting communion called sub utraque specie, allowing to receive both the body and blood of Christ. To conservative Catholics, this is outright heresy. Jakubek is also likely the author of the 4 Prague Articles, the manifesto that will soon become the foundation of the Hussite Wars. By this time, Jan Žižka is back in Prague, a city torn apart by sudden religious conflict. The former bandit, now a ruthless warrior, likely begins to reflect on his nearly 60 years of life and the long list of sins he has accumulated. Seeking redemption, he chooses to stand with Hus's followers in their fight to cleanse society. And for a man like him, there is only one way to defend the Hussite cause: through battle. It all begins in July 1419, when enraged Prague citizens throw Catholic councillors out of the windows of the new town hall during the first defenestration of Prague. Armed clashes in the city intensify, and Žižka realizes he needs a more stable base for his cause. He leaves for Tabor, a newly founded town south of Prague, meant to be a model society where all people are equal. The Hussites elect Žižka as one of Tabor's 4 captains, and he soon becomes the overall military leader. In March 1420, under his command, they clash with the Catholic knights and nobles from other parts of Bohemia in the Battle of Sodomyas. The Hussites face a numerically superior enemy, but the one-eyed commander proves himself a brilliant strategist. The battlefield was flanked by 2 ponds, one full of water, and another which had been drained. The enemies assumed they could attack across the dry pond, but this mistake proved fatal. The heavily armored knights sank into the muddy terrain, making them easy targets for the lightly equipped Hussite fighters. Meanwhile, Žižka blocked the only remaining access route with a wagon fort, his signature tactic, which would soon secure him victory after victory. The victory at Sudomněs greatly strengthens Žižka's army. In the following months, they ruthlessly crush any opposition to the new order, massacring entire villages, burning Catholic clergy alive, and plundering churches, all in the name of God. Fighting spreads across Bohemia, and the Hussites soon face a new powerful enemy. Pope Martin V, losing patience, declares a crusade against the growing heretics. At its head stands Sigismund of Luxembourg, Roman emperor and the rightful heir to the Bohemian throne, but also the man who at the Council of Constance condemned Jan Hus to death. His first direct confrontation with the Hussites takes place in July 1420 near Prague on Vitkov Hill. From today's perspective, it was more of a skirmish than a full-fledged battle, but for the Hussites, it was a decisive victory. Yet before the defeated army retreated from Prague for good, Sigismund made one final stop. 2 weeks after his humiliating defeat, he had the Czech crown placed on his head at Prague Castle, which was still held by Catholic forces, officially becoming the King of Bohemia, much to the outrage of the Hussites. However, his rule remained largely symbolic. Over the next year, the Hussites under Žižka's command marched from victory to victory, capturing one city after another: Vodňany, Prachatice, Berun, Chomutov, and many more. Then came June 1421, bringing a moment that should have ended Žižka's military career. During the siege of Rabí Castle, a crossbow bolt struck his helmet, piercing the visor so badly that he lost his remaining eye. For the Hussites, it was a disaster. How could he possibly lead them into battle if he couldn't even see the terrain to plan his strategy? And yet, against all odds, Jan Žižka recovered. By late summer, he was once again commanding his troops. His staff would carefully describe the landscape in detail, and despite his blindness, he continued to issue near-flawless orders. In 1423, divisions began to shake the Hussite movement. Even Žižka clashed with the priests from Tabor, and soon the Hussites turned their weapons against each other. In June 1424, the more moderate Hussite faction from Prague faced off at Malešov against the radical warriors led by the blind Jan Žižka, the so-called Orabites. This battle would become a masterpiece of Žižka's military career. He ordered his men to seize a fortress on the hill and unleash wagons filled with stones onto the enemy, who were tightly packed in a narrow valley. In moments, the ravine was strewn with the dead and wounded, while the rest fled in panic. Later that year, Žižka learned that his own soldiers were uneasy about slaughtering the Prague citizens. Though he had always been radical and relentless, the aging and blind commander now said, "If you wish to make peace with them, I will not oppose it, as long as there is no treachery. If you choose war, I am ready. Whichever path you take, Žižka will stand by your side." A month later, during the siege of Přibyslav, Jan Žižka of Trocnov succumbs to complications from an untreated infection. He is nearly 65 years old. The divided Hussite armies, who now in his honor begin calling themselves the Orphans, are once again united. And Žižka leaves this world believing that their final victory is within reach.